Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, University Nutrition Professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Nutrition Radio. We have guest hosts Sean and Gaby Fairbanks this week, and we're going to talk about 4 topics before we even do our little intros here, just so you can decide if you want to stay with us or not. We're actually going to look at a trend of fasting, all the different kinds of fasting, intermittent fasting, day fasting, all that kind of stuff. I've actually done some of that myself. We're going to talk about quinoa as far as a carb source. What's good about quinoa? If you've heard about this, sometimes it's touted as a superfood or a grain. It's not really a grain, but similar in nutrition. Then some weight management tips, like food pre-prep, if you will. And then we've got a recipe that involves chicken and salsa. So who are we? I am Lonnie Lowry. I'm a professor of about 20 years. I'm a food industry and academic consultant nowadays. And I'm a serial podcaster, I guess.
Sean Fairbanks, professional tattooer of many years. I have been powerlifting the last couple of years. I am a former amateur logger. We used to go get a lot of firewood.
And I am Gaby Fairbanks. I am from Guatemala. I am a mom, now a power lifter, and a dancer.
Right on. Yeah, I just think it's helpful when we do that too. And Bill Pearl actually told us this on Iron Radio once. He said, I think it's great that you guys say who you are at the beginning, so then people know what's your perspective on things, So that's where you're getting your information today, everybody. All right, let's start with our first topic here, which is the trend of these different kinds of fasting.
Market news, food and fitness trends.
Now, have you guys done some of this before, or how did you just come up with the topic?
Well, so we found going back to the last few months of doing a flex diet certification, there's a section in fasting. So we started doing some once a week fasting, which got us thinking about fasting. And of course, we have quite a few friends that do fasting in various ways. It seems to be what everybody considers to be the perfect cleanse. And then we found this article on Healthline, which I don't know what kind of a reputable source the article would be, but it just goes over 8 health benefits from fasting, including promoting blood sugar control by reducing insulin resistance, promoting health by fighting inflammation, enhancing heart health by improving blood pressure, triglycerides and cholesterol levels, says it may boost brain function, prevent neurodegenerative disorders, aids weight loss, of course, by limiting calorie intake and boosting your metabolism, can increase your growth hormone secretion, could extend longevity, aid cancer prevention by increasing the effectiveness of chemotherapy. And so, we just figured, it's a pretty popular subject among some of our friends. Everything from doing some intermittent fasting to long fasts as a cleanse, soup fasts, liquid fasts, various things like that, which of course fasting is more no calorie intake, but it seems like everybody's got their own spin on it.
Yeah, and then also me, I think tomorrow will be my 5th day because I do fasting once a week. So tomorrow will be my 5th day of fasting. So,
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's pretty extended. 5 days in a row, huh?
No, not in a row. No. The 5th week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 5th week, sorry.
All right, I gotcha.
Kind of spreading out the fast slowly but surely, working our way up to longer fasts.
Yeah, one of my favorite websites for this is the Harvard School of Public Health, the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. They have a great review of different types of intermittent types of fasting, right? They just define it as a diet regimen that cycles between brief periods of fasting with either no food or significant calorie reduction, and then periods of unrestricted eating. Here's some of the examples they have. Alternate day fasting, where you go between days of no food restriction and then days that consist of one meal that provides about 25% of daily calorie needs. And it says, for example, Monday Wednesday, Friday consist of fasting, while the alternate days have no food restrictions. So there's alternate day fasting. There's whole day fasting where you take 1 or 2 days per week and really just don't eat, or maybe just water, very minimal stuff. And then there's time restricted feedings where you follow a meal plan each day and then you designate the time for your fasting. You know, like I know a young man who won't eat after 6 p.m. He actually lost a lot of weight doing this. He's just like, I'm just not going to do that. That sort of makes sense to me because the natural rhythms of the human body, you tend to be more carbohydrate intolerant in the evening and that kind of stuff. So some people will only eat between like 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., or they'll even make it more and more narrow over time, where they're giving themselves these little windows to eat. This says physiologically, it's been shown in animals to increase lifespan and things like that. I like to go to these sort of evidence-based things. And, Healthline's not bad. They usually have mid-level, like health professionals write stuff. And then I like that they have typically an MD or hopefully somebody of that level to kind of medically review it. Anyway, in this particular piece, it says a systematic review of 40 studies found that intermittent fasting was effective for weight loss, with a typical loss of about 7 to 11 pounds over 10 weeks, but there was much variability in the studies. And then it gives some other details. Dropout rates in these studies, 0 to 65%. Ugh. Can you imagine having a study, 65% of your people are like, heck with this? Because it can be hard not to eat. It sounds like you guys know that. It said, overall, the review did not find that intermittent fasting had a low dropout rate and therefore was not necessarily easier to follow. It says, when examining the 12 clinical trials that compared the fasting group to the continuous calorie restriction group, there was no significant difference in weight loss or in body comp. So that last part from this Harvard website here, from the Harvard School of Public Health, that's what I've walked away with, is that intermittent fasting isn't necessarily better than overall calorie restriction, although I can see there's some benefits to it, right? I think the human body is built to go through times of fasting, and in the modern world, we don't have to do that. Like in the past, there's been periods where if you couldn't forage or hunt and you missed a meal, then you just missed a meal. Yeah. And I think it's kind of part of our DNA, if you will. So I think it comes down to the person. Like, is it easier for you to I'm just going to not eat instead of measuring everything and being obsessive, and trying to eat low cal consistently. But I do think it's important for a lot of people to realize the consensus of a lot of health professionals is that it's not that different from just overall calorie restriction. Either way, you're getting lower calories throughout the week. Mm-hmm. But yeah, anyway, so that's just one example of that. But yeah, there could be a lot of interesting things. You mentioned growth hormone release and stuff like that. Yeah, typically that's going to be blunted when you eat a bunch of carbs. And so if you don't eat, I can see how that might help. Yeah. You both have experience with that or no?
Well, we started being a little bit more purposeful with it in the last month. One of the things that we kind of typically our work week is Tuesday through Saturday. So Sunday's the day around the house for house chores and, if we're going to get out and do things. So just kind of by default, Sunday's one of those days where we kind of get up and moving and, probably don't get around to, getting anything into the system until later in the day anyway. And it's typically one of those days where we're not working out hard. We're not, doing anything real intense. And so it just was a pretty easy fit to make that Sunday a day that we just stretched out that breakfast time a little bit longer. Just drinking, black coffee, water and that sort of thing, getting moving and doing some house chores and that. So we've been doing it a little bit more purposeful and kind of stretching that time of not eating out a little bit. And I always find, you spend so much time throughout the week, at least for me, spend so much time throughout the week trying to make sure that I get all of my meals in, and I'm trying to make sure that I get enough of everything at the right time. And during a busy work week, it's always kind of hectic to try and make sure to sit down for my meals. It's always nice to have one day where it's, a little bit more of a break from that, just forcing food down. But we did find that, if you don't think about what that break fast meal is going to be, it's pretty easy to just devour whatever's in front of you. So it's always nice to kind of have something figured out, a decent meal figured out before you go into that stretching of the fast, so that when you do eat, it's not just, everything that you can find.
That's a really good point. I know that a lot of people define these as unrestricted eating when you return to eating, but what I've read in physiology literature, and this is just from memory, I'm not going to cite or quote anything here, but was that a lot of storage enzymes, like fat storage enzymes and that kind of thing in your body, are just primed to just be super reactive when you eat that first meal. So my bias was always after a period, because I would take Fridays typically, and I would just live on basically coffee and like low dose protein drinks, like real low dose, like literally just half a dozen, maybe 10 grams of protein, real diluted thing. Because I was always worried about losing muscle mass. Mm-hmm. But the coffee was huge, I think, because a little bit of stimulant on the days that you otherwise have no food energy, I think, can be very helpful. But then, on Saturday, sort of to what you were saying, I wouldn't just unplan my Saturday. That first meal I would have to do just get back on track, like my oats and berries and that kind of stuff, and not end up having a bucket of cheesy hash browns or something that's probably not on my usual diet just because I'm starving like crazy. Because I typically find that evening that I do that, because satiety levels fall in the evening for a lot of people. You get hungrier, and maybe with fasting you get used to that. But I never really did. So I would do that pulse fast kind of thing where, again, just low dose protein and coffee throughout the day. And then in the evening, man, there were a few times where I couldn't make it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to cheat and have myself a little bit of egg whites, just egg whites in the same dose I would have drank the protein. But man, I am starving to death here. And maybe that was partly because I had already lost at that point a lot of times 10 or 20 pounds, and your body's like, oh my God, what are you doing to me? Mm-hmm. But it is interesting the different ways people do this. Off again, on again, day to day, or like just the window.
We had some kids that were working in Yellowstone Park or somewhere around there come into the shop a couple weeks ago, and they were on a 5-day fast. They weren't eating anything. All they could do was drink water and tea, and then eat whatever candy they wanted to, so that so they could really get in tune with their hunger. It's like, okay, we have these little, suckers in the shop for people, if their blood sugar goes down. Man, those kids just devoured the candy. And it's like, I don't really think that's a fast, guys.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right to me. Yeah.
Funny. Well, with me, personally, we decided when we started the fast, Wednesday, so we work out Monday, Tuesday, we take a break on Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday. So we decided on Wednesday to do the fasting, and we thought it was going to work out, and it was all perfect. And I forgot that on Wednesdays, right now that I'm practicing for my performance in September, I was going to dance for 2 hours. So I went on with my day, and I was fasting. I think I was going on 12 hours from the night before to like 3 p.m. or 2 p.m. And then I could not hold any information. My brain was foggy. I was trying to learn the moves and just comprehend what my friend was telling me to do, and I could not do it. And then finally I said, nope, I can't do this. And I just grabbed one of my cinnamon candies that I always carry in my bag, and immediately I feel so much better. So now that's when we decided that on Sundays, when we don't have to do much, is going to be our fasting days, and that seems to work out. And then we're trying to extend it. So the first time we did, I believe, 14 hours. And then the following Sunday, we would like to extend it to maybe 15 hours or 16 hours to hopefully get to a 24-hour period of fasting. Mm-hmm. The first 2 Sundays were good. Third Sunday, I think we were very hangry, so we decided to cut it short.
Yeah.
Like we said before, we do have a meal already prepared that we already know that it's about 6 ounces of protein. And then we had some rice and some vegetables, so we just ate that. And then last Sunday, I think we made it to maybe 16 hours when we were working in the yard. And I told Sean that, can we eat now? Can we eat now? Can we eat now? What about now? What about now? So we're eating now.
Right.
So some Sundays are pretty good that you forget because you get busy. But if you are not busy, all I'm thinking about is eating, because I do enjoy eating a lot.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, everybody, before we hit record, we were talking about different cultures and how going to the market and obviously meals and meal timing. It's a huge part of a bunch of cultures. I feel like here in the U.S., we're just constantly running like crazy. We're not picking out a day to do meal prep. We'll talk about that in the next segment or two here. It can become very challenging, I think, when you have performance demands on you. Yeah, like you were saying, and you have to try to. You're like, well, I'm not eating today. Well, maybe that's a day you shouldn't be trying the fasting.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I used to do Fridays, because I thought people are in a good mood. Whatever courses I'm teaching that day, typically maybe 2 courses during that day. It's Friday. Things are just a little bit lighter. It's probably a better day to do this kind of stuff than like on a Monday, or Tuesday, where everybody's more, typically at least, high strung and starting their work week and all that kind of stuff. I do think some of the benefits they get a little overblown, but I do think it makes sense, like evolutionarily, that there'd be periods where you didn't eat. Sean, I know that you're into weight gain, and Chris Shugart had written some stuff years ago on the T Nation website about pulse fasting, and I think he was using like protein shakes and stuff. But there was also this idea they had where you would purposely try to overeat after a period of fasting and try to take advantage of this anabolic response. My problem with that is I would never know how much of that gets partitioned into body fat versus lean mass. I think it might be wishful thinking that if I take my Friday and I fast all day and then I just gorge on Saturday, I'm not sure that's all going to become muscle tissue. I'm too paranoid about that. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting topic because there's so many kinds of it. It's always in the news. My personal belief has just always been, or conclusion, that if it fits the way that you do things, if you don't want to eat low cal all the time, it's an all or none kind of thing. Like, I'm just not going to eat in this window. There's no measuring. There's really no thinking about it. You just don't do it, and it makes it kind of easier. I also think people need to remember the 6 or 8 hours or however long you sleep. That can be part of the window as well, right? So, that's kind of a bonus.
I do count that. Usually the last time that we eat on a Saturday, I start counting around 11 or 10:30. I start counting from then, and then I go to sleep. And usually we don't have to wake up super early on Sunday, so I'm still asleep by 9, so that counts. So that weighs so much. The hard thing for us is, like Sean was saying, being a tattoo artist, our work schedule is from noon to 8. So I only work part-time so I can come home and be a mom. But he doesn't come home till 8:30, 9:30 sometimes. And I wait for him to have dinner. So we end up having dinner around, oh my gosh, 10:30?
10 a lot of the time.
Most of the week. So for us, it'll be beneficial health-wise as well to have dinner early, but we can't really do that. So we have to start fasting around like 11 and then carry on from there.
Well, yeah, and they talk a lot about, the benefits of having, a break from the insulin that we have just throughout all the food that we have in the Western diet. And so, even though, I'm not technically trying to lose weight at this point, although that may change here in the next, 6 months as we go into another meet in April. But, I just feel like it's important to have a break from just all the insulin response that you have just throughout the day, just eating the way that there is. And we do a lot of whole foods and we cook a lot of our own meals, but, even still there's.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That was one of my main ideas about that, is especially in a high carb environment, or you're somebody who's purposely overeating like you do, or like I used to do all the time. I feel like you need that break. Otherwise, that insulin, its job is to push your blood sugar into your tissues acutely, like right now. But hyperinsulinemia that's chronically elevated like that, it starts to reprogram some of your fat storage machinery. It's not cool. And so I do think it's probably a good idea to get out from under it, almost that burden, if you will. Yeah, agreed. All right. Okay, let's move on. Our next topic is quinoa.
Breaking nutrition science.
Now, you guys had mentioned that this is something that you've consumed for quite a while.
Yeah, Gabby was making this for the last handful of years. And the nice thing about quinoa is when you cook it, it pretty much takes on any flavor that you put with it. So we do a lot of bouillon with it, which I guess if you get, late stage competition prep, you might not want all the sodium in that. But yeah, it's, we found this article, Quinoa Germ and Nutritional Powerhouse, and just talks about how it's a pseudo grain from the South American Andean region, bioactive components, high quality proteins, fiber, phytochemicals, amino acids are essential amino acids. One of the interesting things about it is that it grows in, areas that can be drought prone, high salinity soil, areas where more stuff isn't growing, which makes it pretty nice for, a global food source. But yeah, we've made it just as a whole grain to eat, in place of rice. We put it in salads, which is really good in salads. We put it in soups. Gabby's made some crackers out of it in the past when we were trying to do gluten-free pizzas for her and that sort of thing. So
yeah, the gluten-free thing by itself is a bonus, I think. I looked into this just a little bit. I can't say I've consumed a ton of quinoa over the years. I've tried it. If you look on like Healthline, we were just talking about, they talk about it has 3 or 4 grams of fiber in a 3.5 ounce serving. Supposedly more fiber even than brown rice. And, they talk about the plant chemicals in there, the phytochemicals. But that's also true. We're just talking about how good brown rice was for some of those, right? So I think it's the fiber. It's the low glycemic index. The glycemic index is like 50 to 53. So listeners, if you're not familiar, think like 100 scale. I always think about like an on-ramp onto a highway, and if you're going 100 miles an hour, that's really reckless and fast. So it's like cornflakes, polished white rice is way up there, that kind of stuff. So things like oats and apples, and even in this case, quinoa, the glycemic index is a nice law-abiding speed of 53. Again, how quickly it's entering your bloodstream. It is kind of interesting. You mentioned it was sort of a pseudo grain. Yeah, so it's really a seed. One of the things that I heard about it is that it has some resistant starch and it may help with your gut microbiome. But I looked at a paper here by Lee and colleagues last year, 2022, Lee, L-I, impact of daily consumption of whole grain quinoa enriched bread on gut microbiome in males. This is just in males, but the results showed that the small changes in the type of cereal that they intervened with, they substituted 20 grams of refined wheat flour with the whole grain quinoa flour. That was not able to change their gut microbiome, and they suspected that they might have had to do more than that. So sometimes it's just a dose issue as well. But it's appealing to me because in some ways it seems like oats, and that it's got a little bit more protein than some of the grains. And of course, if it's a seed, I can see that. It's got a nice low glycemic index and that kind of thing. So again, you guys said it's very versatile. It'll pick up flavors.
Yeah, and not only that, so I think why me and Sean work is that he's the smart one that says, "Oh, we should try this new thing," or "This is good for you." And I'm like, "Okay, how can I make this taste good, or how can I make it fun?" So quinoa also comes in like different colors. So I always buy the wild ones. It has like the little red, brown, black, white, off-brand stuff. So I always buy that one. And then if you eat it just like that, it is, I guess, boring and dry. So if you mix it up with vegetables, if you mix it up with cubes of ham and stuff like that, and like Sean said, sometimes I add some bouillon. I always put garlic and stuff. It does taste really good. I remember telling my son the first time he realized he was 2, and I gave him some. He didn't want to eat it because he didn't want to try new things. And I told him just for fun, like, no, they're spider eggs. You're going to like them. They're going to make you grow strong. He said, spider eggs. I'm like, yeah, don't tell anybody, but they're spider eggs. And he would devour it, and he loved it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And right now, even though when I make it right now, he's almost 13. He said, "Oh, those spider eggs?" I'm like, "Yep." So he still likes them.
He just calls it that. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, like Sean was saying, sometimes like they get so dry. So I would make like little crackers. I would make the pizza crust so we can make our own pizzas. But if you add it to also salads, it tastes really, really good. But just by itself, like if you would eat rice, it's so dry. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really good.
It's a nice option, I feel like. I mean, it gets a lot of attention as a superfood and that kind of stuff. And it sort of falls in that category we were talking about before. Like, what are some of the carbohydrate energy sources that you see athletes and, bodybuilders over the years, they really lean toward? It is this kind of stuff. It fits that. The brown rice, the yams, quinoa. It just makes sense. It is interesting to me that being a seed and not a grain, it's not as incomplete as a protein, so it's actually a little bit higher quality source of protein. I don't think this would make this my main source of protein, but again, when you're using it like a grain, you wouldn't be doing that anyway. You'd be throwing in the chicken or whatever else, other protein sources, I imagine. But,
yeah.
Well, and it's just nice to have more options for, especially when you're doing meal prep. It's like, okay, so we got rice, we got brown rice, we got wild rice, we got potatoes, we got sweet potatoes. What else can we throw in?
Right.
And it's nice to have that, just as it's a different texture. It definitely, like I said, it pulls more flavors that you can do with it, and that sort of thing. So it's just a nice, break and pace.
Right. I've attended a couple of NASA conferences lately, and that's something they always talk about is when you're a captive audience like that, it's an extreme example, but variety is so huge. And it's kind of like what you guys are saying too. If you're not going to just be a victim of fast food and just drive all over and eat different things, it's nice to have some different, starch sources basically in your arsenal. That's just to mix it up, just so you don't lose your mind, with monotony. Totally. Okay. Well, that's a good segue. Let's talk about our next section here, and that's your diet tip.
Weight management tips.
Now, you guys have been thoughtful food preparers and consumers for a while. What do you have for us?
Well, so on the subject of meal prep and, keeping away from monotony, I find that when we're doing meal prep, I'm pretty good at eating the same day for multiple days, but I'm not very good at eating the same meal for multiple meals. So we usually have to food prep at least a couple different protein sources and starch sources and stuff, so that I can have a different meal each meal throughout the day. Now I can repeat that same pattern for multiple days without getting bored with it. But if I have chicken and broccoli and rice for every meal, 3 or 4 in a row, I'm going to eat 2 of them and then just be like, I don't want to eat. But if I have pork with some, rice, and then I have chicken with some, veggies, and then I have, ground beef with something or whatever, as long as we're kind of changing it up. And when we do our meal prep, it's funny talking to some of our friends. And again, so many people are just like, man, meal prep's too complicated. I just can't get with it. We've kind of figured out over the years, we've done where we meal prepped all of our meals and portioned it into individual containers and had all that ready to just grab and go, which is nice in the morning to just grab and go, but it also makes the meal prep day more involved. And so we've, done away with a lot of that and just gone to, okay, protein, in containers that we can easily dish out. And then, our carb sources and our veggies that are just easy to dish out. And then just in the morning, just throw it together real quick. And that cuts down on, a good hour on the meal prep day. We've been using the outside grill a lot for the meat. And that way there's not much cleanup, which that was the other thing. You do meal prep, sometimes the cleanup can get crazy, but
right.
Do a lot of, just throwing stuff in the oven too, where you just kind of put it in a Pyrex, throw it in the oven, and then you do have a Pyrex to kind of deal with, but that's kind of by the end of the week, because we would just usually put some tinfoil over it and throw it in the fridge, and that way it's just in the Pyrex. But yeah, just, how we've kind of dialed that down. One little hack that we've realized, it's funny, we finally realized after many years of, cooking our veggies and steaming our veggies and baking our veggies and then trying to throw that in with meal prep. And then when you reheat it, the whole, shop smells like feet. And you just realize that, man, the broccoli is good, but it sure doesn't smell good when you reheat it. If you just take raw broccoli, raw asparagus, raw Brussels sprouts, whatever, you throw it in your Tupperware and then reheat your rice and your meat, it steams it to perfection, and you don't have to, cook that as a meal prep. You just throw it in raw, and then when you reheat it in the microwave, it ends up being perfect. Ironically, we figured that out about 3 days before in the Flex Diet Cert. I got to the portion where Mike Nelson mentions that, and it's like, oh yeah, we just figured that one out.
Just saw that.
Yeah.
So this is like an individual serving in a small Tupperware with a lid. Is that what you're talking about?
We've got, well, we started putting everything in, glass Tupperware containers. But we still have, like, in the microwave, we got like a little cover that you put on stuff so it doesn't splatter all over inside your microwave. And put that cover over just the Pyrex, and you're reheating it. Just the steam from the rice and the meat will just kind of, in a minute and a half of reheat, it steams the broccoli to just perfect. It's still crunchy. It's nice and warm. It tastes great. Same with the asparagus, which, I like asparagus, but if you overcook asparagus, it starts having a texture that just makes me gag. And so it's all getting that perfect cook on an asparagus where it's still crunchy and not, stringy and boogery. So
right.
It ends up working out perfect for those two things for me. And I'm not a big fan of the Brussels sprouts, but Gabby is. And I know she prefers it when it's in the oven and, charred to perfection, but,
Yeah, no, and with me, I like to just, like, I know that Mondays are grocery days. I enjoy going to the grocery store and just looking at what fruit I can eat that day or what vegetables look good. I really enjoy it. But Mondays, I know that I go to the grocery store. I already have a list of what we're going to eat. And I try to buy 3 different kinds of proteins. And then I come home and like Sean said, he's in charge of the grill. So he will cook it like 3/4 of the way. So that way, when we also microwave it, you don't have to overcook your meat. So he'll grill the chicken breast and the steaks, and then we'll finish them up in the oven. But for me, it's easier to have the protein and the rice or the quinoa or the sweet potatoes already ready to go. So when I'm hungry, I know that I can just grab that, and I cooked it, and then I can just weigh it, and then that's what I'm eating for the day. So that way I am not hungry at work, and then we have so many restaurants around us, so we end up buying out, and then I don't know how much I'm really eating. You can log it, or you can kind of think, okay, I'm having this much chicken or this much salad, but you really don't know how many hidden calories are in there. So I think that for me, like spending a little time on Mondays prepping, is beneficial for the rest of the week. So for me, it works out super good.
Yeah, we have a lot of friends that are, foodies, and so they'll be like, the meal prep's all fine and good, but I want a more elaborate meal. And what I find is, during the week, during the lunches and stuff, just being able to have a decent meal there that's already prepped and ready to go. It's so nice to be able to eat and not be starving, and not at the tattoo shop. Over the years, it's been like, okay, I'm starving. I need something to eat. Before we started meal prepping, it's like, well, what are we going to get? And you're always trying to think of what to order. And, we'll sit there for 2 hours going, that doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound good, until you just end up grabbing something because you're dying. Whereas, if there's a couple meals in there, it's just nice. You go through the day, you don't have to worry about it. And then we get creative with dinners, and that's where you get your foodie on and spice everything up and, sauce everything up and get real creative with it. But the meal prep throughout the week for lunches, it's just more straightforward, as long as it's, palatable and not super dry and terrible that way, overcooked. Then you get creative with the dinners.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, good point about you can steam up or cook up the vegetables very quickly. Like a lot of this, it's a good distinction you're making about eating for utility versus eating for like a foodie kind of culinary deal. and having the protein made ahead of time, I think, is just huge. Like my wife will do that. She has this little trick with chicken tenders where she uses a paper towel and a fork, and she can get that little tendon out of the chicken tenders, like a zipper, just whoop right out of there. Or it's just because they're usually less expensive, but you can find videos on how to do that. It's really pretty slick. But we'll make those, or we'll take chicken breasts and like cut them into, in half or in thirds, and just, you can freeze those in a freezer bag, and then we just grab them out, and then we can put them in whatever meal we want when we get creative with the dinner thing. We can have a different, geographical, like around the world kind of dish. We can have a whatever we want, and we got some of the, like at least the pre-cooked chicken in place. Because a lot of times I can tell you, as a nutritionist, a lot of my fellow dietitians, they say that high protein diets are high fat diets. And it's like, yeah, if you live on fast food, Big Macs, yes, that's true. That's low quality, greasy meat. But don't confuse protein foods with the protein, the nutrient, right? So when I say high protein diet, I mean the nutrient. I mean, a chicken breast, a skinless, boneless chicken breast is almost entirely protein. That's what I mean. And I love that it gives people like us the control. If you just drive around and you let the best smelling food dictate your diet, or a commercial or something. I mean, I used to joke with students all the time. I want to plan my diet, not the clown in the red wig. He's not qualified to tell me what to eat. And yet if I don't pre-prep, if I don't set aside some time, I'm adrift, on this ocean of this commercial fast food ocean it's going to be very hard to control. So the people that I think tell you that we don't have the patience to do any kind of preparation ahead of time, they're also the ones I don't want to hear any complaints about how they can't stick to a diet, because you got to put in some kind of plan or effort, I would think, up front.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's funny you say that. I always tell Sean that I throw tantrums here and there, but I'm allowed to complain about my workouts and my weight because I'm doing something about it. Like I'm allowed to complain about that I don't look good today, but I'm doing everything I can. Like I'm eating well, I'm prepping, I'm doing all of that. So I get to complain because I'm doing it, right?
So you're loud, right?
So I'm loud. But also, one of the things that I enjoy, again, as a mom, which is my first priority, having like 4 different types of proteins cooked for the week. I know it takes a lot of time on Monday, but having a lot of different proteins for the week, having like your brown rice, having whole potatoes, sweet potatoes, and then maybe some different kinds of salads. My son likes buffets. So he always, like, for dinner, I'm like, Lance, what do you want for dinner? And he would be like, well, what do I have? And I'm like, well, go look. So he likes to pick, today I'm going to have steak with potato and maybe just broccoli. Tomorrow I'll have chicken and I'll add some pico de gallo, and then I'll have it with rice. So it's also a variety for him. And it makes me feel good that I'm making, again, dinners fun, and it's not boring for him, because I think as an adult, you can understand that you're eating or with a purpose. So you're okay with eating your chicken, your rice, your broccoli. But for a kid, it's boring, and like I don't want to make it so. So then, like, right, a day you can pick and choose and like mix up the vegetables, mix up the grains, mix up the proteins, and then he's having fun. And if he's having fun and eating good, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and I used to think about that when I would compete. I would eat a little bit differently than the rest of the family, because I'd have a lot of stuff, set aside and portion controlled, and, Dad did his thing. But I always try to keep in mind, and I think it's kind of the point you're making, kids, they don't want to eat like a hardcore restricted athlete. They need calories to grow. Yeah. They like need more calories than adults in a lot of ways. But you can still do it in a healthy way and yet not be super restrictive, and have them eat like we used to do, which, exactly 1 medium yam and 2 chicken breasts in a Tupperware container and just eat it all dry, nuke it and eat it dry, it's terrible. Yeah, you can't do that as a family.
Yeah, and the boys get dessert. I just look at them.
Yeah, you're right. There is a certain element of that. I did that quite a bit. I always remember something Dorian Yates said to us once. We were talking to him in a hotel room. We were interviewing him, and he said, I always remember that it's not, I could complain. I can have a tantrum about not eating the cake. And then I remind myself, fine, then sit down and eat it. Like, what are you complaining about? You're doing this to yourself. Do you want it or do you not? And it was just so matter of fact the way he said that. I just thought, yeah. So I would watch them have a dessert. I'm like, okay, I don't know. Because I got to compete here in 12 weeks. Like, I'm not going to get on the stage in my underwear in front of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And, so I was highly motivated. It's just, you don't have to sit there and watch them, I guess, necessarily. Just try to walk away. I don't know. Yeah, there is some of that going on. If you have a goal, there's going to be some sacrifice. All right. We have one last topic, and that is the recipe.
Rant, product review, or recipes.
So you guys have had some good recipes. What do you have for us this week?
Oh my goodness. So like we were just talking about chicken breast being super good, all protein, skinless, boneless chicken breasts. We cook a lot of that, but it's also super dry. So you can try to put salsa on top. You can try to put condiments on top. You can try to chop it up into salads, but it's still super dry. So we found a recipe that actually a friend of ours gave us a few months back. If you grab around 6 skinless, boneless chicken breasts and put it in a slow cooker and you cook it on high for 4 hours, and then you just leave it there. So you don't have to do anything fancy. Just grab the slow cooker, throw in the chicken breasts, put it on high and walk away. Then you come back after 6 hours and then you buy big salsa containers in the refrigerator aisle. So it's the pico de gallo, cantina sauce. And then you add, I like the fresh pico de gallo and Sean likes very saucy ones. So we mix both of them up and then you grab the chicken breast and you just like fork it apart and then add the salsa and then leave it on low for 2 more hours and then walk away. And then when you come back, it's kind of like pulled pork, but pulled chicken and the sauce kind of integrated in the fibers of the chicken breast. And it stays saucy all the time. So then you can just grab your chicken and put it over rice or eat it with your potato or eat it like over whatever you want, but it's never dry. So you can even eat it just like that with chips if you want to, because it's not dry. It's delicious.
Yeah, that's amazing because one of my problems was always, and for years and years, I wouldn't put the time in other than just to pan sear the chicken ahead of time, and I would just eat dry chicken breasts. I'm telling you, Sean, you alluded to this earlier a little bit, but sometimes you can barely gag some of this down, like I don't know, even if you're hungry, you're looking at a plain dry chicken breast and some overcooked asparagus or broccoli, and you're just like, here we go. And life doesn't have to be like that. Because what you're talking about with the pico de gallo and that sort of thing, we eat quite a bit of that here. It's funny. I don't even like tomatoes. Like, I just, it's one of those weird foods for me. Everybody's got their comfort foods and discomfort foods. But for me, like sliced tomatoes, they're kind of slimy and seedy. But for whatever reason, I'll eat pico de gallo. And that's like fresh salsa. Or we'll go to Sam's Club and just get like fresh salsa, like it's not even cooked, I don't think. And for whatever reason, I'll eat that. But what you're saying is you just throw that in after the chicken's cooked for a couple hours in the slow cooker, and you're good to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you have all the fiber from the vegetables. It makes it taste good. You don't have to add any salt, pepper, or any of that. And you just eat it, and it's not dry. And I actually get super excited when we decide to make that chicken for the week. It's really good, and then it heats up really well. You keep your the sauciness and the yumminess. It's good.
Yeah. So my wife's from Guatemala, and one of the things that, the difference between, say Mexican food and Guatemalan food. Mexican food, you're going to have a lot of kind of peppers and spice and heat. Guatemalan food is more cilantro, lime, and
fresh
baby onions, the chive. And so one of the things that you can do with that as well that I really like is if you just have fresh cilantro to just top anything with, just adds a little bit more of that freshness to it as well. So you can do that pulled chicken with the salsa, and then if you just sprinkle some fresh cilantro on there, it's just that little freshness on the top, which is really nice.
It looks prettier too.
Yeah, and it does look pretty. Nice colors.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Everybody, before I hit the record button today, I was talking about, I had just attended a workshop, to your point, Sean, about like a lot of these Latino countries, they have very different approaches to things. Their starch sources are different, the spices they use are different, and that kind of thing. And I think it would be smart for a lot of Americans to realize that what people eat in different regions of Central or South America and how that compares to Spain over in Europe. These are, yes, there are some similarities, but it's not all one thing. In fact, I should send you guys an image. I was doing a little coffee workshop thing, and they were saying that Guatemala, I think, was the first country to identify that the coffee tastes different from different regions of the country. And now everybody does that kind of stuff, like where you grow it, leads to different notes in the coffee and all that kind of stuff. So it's cool, not to lump a lot of these places together when they have different traditions and different spices and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's funny you say that. And just one quick thing about Guatemala, we're known for, being tiny and happy, and we dance all the time. But we have, I like to say, the best coffee in the world, just because Guatemala, I believe we have about 42 volcanoes, and about 36 are active always. But we grow coffee. We grow our coffee in the high mountains of Guatemala, but everything is grown in volcanic soil in the shade. So you are not making the coffee be mature rapidly with the sun. So it's all grown in the shades. And sometimes they do grow it in the sun, but most of them is grown in the shade. So our coffee, I believe that when I buy Guatemalan coffee, it does taste different. We drink it black, so it does. Very different from other countries. I know Colombia also grows coffee, but Guatemala is all grown in the volcanic soil. And for some reason, I'm a little biased. For some reason, I think it's the best coffee in the world.
Well, that's what I'm looking at a screenshot here. It talks about volcanic soil, cool, rainy climate, creates coffee with fruit notes and a well-balanced body. I don't know. Just looks interesting stuff. Anyway, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about understanding where food comes from and why some places, are different, or you might prefer them. And coffee's a good example.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for the recipe, guys. That's all 4 topics for this week. Listeners will have Sean and Gaby one more week, similar topics, similar 4 topics with trends and, breaking science and either like a tip. I like to go to people that are practitioners, right? Like you guys are actively competing and dancing. You're doing all these things. It's good to go out and see what people are actually doing. And that can lead to innovations, in products and all that kind of stuff. Just to like crowdsourcing. I always thought it was odd that these companies, they might rely on half a dozen internal scientists to come up with their ideas. It's like, how about you crowdsource? Like go out and ask people, because that's always going to outperform the handful of people that you have, no matter how expert internally. So I appreciate you guys with your comments on how you actually do things. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's going to be it. And I guess we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you. Bye.
The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.